Dead Island is a franchise that's just kinda dead in the water. The main series has been in development hell for over 6 years and there's no sign of the game ever being close to release. We definitely know it's a thing, but that's about it. The release date has never really been concrete and the game itself has had quite a rocky development cycle. I've mentioned in previous videos that Dead Island 2 has been handed over to around 3 different developers now, with a build of the original version developed by Jaeger even being leaked online recently. But to this day, we still have no idea if this is the build they're still working on. As for the franchise as a whole, well, Team Silver are very keen for there to be more stories from Dead Island, and with the sequel being stuck in development limbo, that didn't stop them attempting to branch the series out slightly with a spew of different spin-off titles. For a world like Dead Island, a spin-off sounds like a really good idea. A spin-off gives the developers the chance to expand the world of a franchise, whether it's just a story following alongside a character from the main game, or just having a completely new story set in the same universe. The moment a spin-off is suggested, a whole new set of ideas can flow in. Or it can add nothing at all, which again is fine, not as impressive, but you can still have a fun time with it. But when it comes to Dead Island, the current spin-offs we have, they're not that great. In fact, I'd go as far to say that all the current spin-offs to the series are pretty forgettable. They've attempted to make an arcade-like runner called Retro Revenge, a game that used one of the main characters from the still in development sequel, and the game itself is, well, I mean, look at it, it doesn't scream brilliance. There was also Dead Island Epidemic, a MOBA of sorts that was actually kind of fun but died before it could hit the initial release. The PvP, or as they called it, PvPvPe, I've got that wrong.
If you prefer your opponents to be of the undead variety, then take the fight to other players in the unique PvPvPvE 3-team 12-player scavenger mode.
The PvP, or as they call it PvPvPvE, was going to be the main focus of the game and ended up being pretty average, with the additional modes that focused on PvE and co-op being more interesting, and to me they were way better, but they never really focused on them and there was very little to offer on the table. And finally, there was the recently released mobile game Dead Island Survivors. It's a mobile game, and it's pretty shit. I mean, the trailer alone annoyed me personally. Can you imagine having the audacity to go, hey, we know you want to hear more about Dead Island 2, but here's a low quality mobile game riddled with microtransactions instead. Good, right?
Do you guys not have phones?
Yeah, you guys all have phones, right?
The thing is, these are all games that I played when they came out. I tend to keep Dead Island on my radar just in case something is ever mentioned or leaked. However, one spin-off I never really touched until fairly recently was Escape Dead Island. I recall this game at launch not being well received, and then I picked it up on sale at a later date and forgot all about it. It wasn't until the recent leak of Dead Island 2 that I finally got an urge to go and give it a try, and from playing through it finally, I can see why the reviews weren't in its favour. Now I want to be clear that when I went into Escape Dead Island, I had no real expectations for it. All that I knew is it was trying to be different to the main series, and that's all I could think. It's Dead Island, but not exactly. And how was it? It was alright. I don't think it's awful, there's clearly some good ideas within Escape Dead Island, but that's about it. I think most of all the biggest problems from this game comes from the overall story and the direction this game took. The game starts with you infiltrating a laboratory 2 days before the original events on Banoi in the first Dead Island. Your objective is to infiltrate the laboratory, find the intel on the virus and steal it. However, when you arrive, it appears that the virus has already begun to spread and you're caught in the middle of the initial outbreak. So the game is a prequel, which is great. We have a new island to explore, an introduction to the outbreak that kicks off the main events of the first game. The story itself even starts with good promise. It even goes the extra mile and links back to characters within the first game. You have Junmei speaking to you directly over the radio, and later you discover that Kevin, also known as Sharon, was involved with the initial outbreak. And then they never mention it ever again throughout the entire game. As the actual main story of Escape Dead Island is set 6 months later. All that's relevant from the beginning is Junmei arrives on the island after you and explains that the agent you played at the beginning has hidden some intel and that you need to go and find it at some point in the game, and magically you do. The real story is about 3 wannabe journalists heading towards the island when the infection started to uncover the truth of what happened, since the disaster of Banoi is still being covered up somehow 6 months later. How was it being covered up for this long? No idea. They briefly mention it and then it's never addressed again. And that's a recurring pattern with the plot in this game. A lot of it is just mentioned once and then you never hear about it again. Out of the trio you play as Cliff, a lazy jock who started putting effort into things once his dad promoted his sister instead of himself. As a reaction to this, Cliff steals a boat from his dad and then convinces his 2 friends to join him so that they can reveal the truth and become journalists and throughout the game they keep coming back to this point, and Cliff confronting his dad becomes a more centered plot point for the rest of the game. As for how they know about this island and how they know this island wouldn't be protected, again, never mentioned. Once you arrive on the island, your first objective is to investigate the beach and take pictures. Cliff is the photographer of the group, and throughout the game you can find objects of interest to take pictures of and add them to your collection. As for the benefit of this, honestly there isn't one. Unless you're attempting to find all the collectibles, the camera as a gameplay mechanic is entirely useless. It feels like they saw the appeal of using the camera in Dead Rising and then just copied the core concept and nothing else. Like, imagine you're playing Dead Rising and when you take a picture of something, instead of getting an XP boost, you just get a snippet of dialogue about Frank's thought on the picture, and that's it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you'd probably just forget about the camera altogether. And that is exactly what I did in this game. So after you've done looking around for a bit, the boat will suddenly explode, and then when attempting to return to the boat, Cliff is knocked out cold, and upon waking up you're in a completely different location, and this is where the real meat of the gameplay kicks in. The gameplay in Escape Dead Island is a really poor mix of a hack and slash and stealth. Cliff has the ability to use firearms and melee weapons, but the game pushes you towards using a more stealthy approach to take out zombies quietly and avoid getting detected. However, while this is fine, the AI in this game is utter garbage. Zombies can detect you randomly and sometimes look dead straight at you and not notice you're there. The amount of times I've managed to walk up to a zombie and still get a stealth kill on it purely because it didn't detect me as it was standing up is frankly rather embarrassing. The dumbest thing this game does is at the start of Cliff's story you find a screwdriver to stealth kill infected with, but not a melee weapon. So I kept getting spotted, and since you don't have a melee weapon to defend yourself with and you won't get it till later, you just end up kiting zombies in a circle while you wait for the AI to have a moment and forget where you are. I think the longest one I had this with was about 20 minutes. And since you can get spotted randomly for no real reason throughout the game, you'll soon become familiar with the combat in this game, and it isn't any better either. Melee is really slow and janky, worse than the original Dead Island somehow, and it's even possible for zombies to get you in a stun loop, so you just die and you can't do anything about it. So you get stuck in this really crap situation of, do I take the game at a snail's pace and hope the AI doesn't fuck up, or do I just say fuck it and kill everything I see? And being I chose the latter of the two options, I can confidently tell you that the combat in this game doesn't grow on you. Instead, at the end of the game it gets incredibly frustrating, because as the game progresses, the overall world and story just gets weirder and weirder.
I'm on an alien world making first contact and shit! Cliff Kalo, reporting live from Phoenix X whatever, fuck you!
After you return to the beach, things start to get really bizarre and you end up being crushed by a shipping container falling out of the sky. But it appears that this was all just a dream, so once you're awake, you go and investigate the island a bit further with your friends. And after discovering a pile of corpses, one of your friends get bitten, so your goal now is to try and find a cure. How are zombies still alive after 6 months? Again, no idea. From here the game is pretty much set in motion. Find the key cards, gain entry to the lab and find a cure. However, things don't go according to plan. Since the reality you're experiencing isn't exactly accurate, throughout the game Cliff will start to experience hallucinations. It's never really indicated as to why he started having these episodes, but it's something you pick up from immediately at the start of the game. At first it will be simple things like Cliff hears things that didn't happen, but towards the end of the game you'll start to imagine whole scenarios where you'll end up waking up inside the same container every time something is about to happen. The game tries to push this narrative of what's real and what isn't, but because it jumps in and out of these points so frequently, I have no idea what the fine line is between reality and fantasy. The bits I could gather that were real in this is that your friend is definitely infected and she definitely dies later on.
I'm here. I admit, I don't look so good.
You're not her! I don't care anymore! It ends now!
Come and get me.
But that's about it. I couldn't figure out if some of the main plot points were actually real because right after some of them you just reset in the container again. And it's not worth stressing over since apparently this game isn't canon in the slightest. I didn't know that going into this game. I only found that out when trying to look up an explanation of the story after finishing it because I was that confused. I would say I'd avoid spoiling the plot of this game, but there's nothing really noteworthy about the plot overall. You mainly just look for those keycards, and then the ending takes the hallucinations to another level, and all I will say is that the end segment is what really ruins any charm this game had. As you know when you play a stealth game and then the ending's just focused on combat and fighting through hordes of enemies? Yeah, Escape Dead Island does the exact same thing, and it was by far the worst part of the game. Or at least, the worst part of the base game. Escape Dead Island has one DLC and is probably by far the worst thing I've accidentally walked into in a video game. Throughout the game you'll find these vaults on the floor that are open to explore once you retrieve the combat flashlight. Once you go down them you'll start to explore a very dull, barely lit labyrinth, and you can get stuck in these for almost an hour. Originally I thought these were meant to be shortcuts since I didn't know this game had DLC initially, so I went down one of them and got stuck for ages trying to find my way out. All these labs have to offer really are pieces of lore and a couple of new weapons once you beat the lab, and that alone isn't worth it. Also, it adds a new enemy type to the labyrinth that is incredibly hard to kill with firearms and is meant to be killed with a stealth takedown and is incredibly sensitive to noise. So this is a prime example of where the enemy AI in this game is completely fucked up. Seriously, if you intend to play this game, avoid the Underwater Labs DLC entirely. It's not fun, it's not quick, and it almost made me stop playing the game entirely. Seriously, this is one of the worst DLCs I've ever played. It is that shit. Fuck this DLC. As for looking at more positives within the game, I think one of the things this game does incredibly well is the comic book-like art style. I've said previously that Dead Island always felt like a bit more of a B-movie when it comes to zombie genres. And while this game does attempt to be serious at points, the combat using a comic-like effect seems to fit really well. Especially when considering how weird the game can get due to Cliff's mental state. I think the whole idea of having a mentally unstable protagonist is a really good idea, and I personally think it should be explored more, especially within zombie games. But I feel the way they approached it here was entirely wrong. The title of the game is Escape Dead Island, and you don't attempt to leave up until the end of the game. And even then, that's not the ending of the game, that's like a bit 20 minutes before the end of the game. If they made it so Cliff was a survivor of the initial outbreak and he was never able to leave the island, then I feel like justification behind the hallucinations would have been more valid. Instead, you arrive on the island and he's already insane. There's only two ways I think they could have got away with this, one being that the insanity was brought up from the anger of his sister getting the promotion over himself, but even that doesn't make much sense. The only other way they could have done it is that the ending plays on the theory that this wasn't the first run, because once the credits end, the box that Cliff sent out hits the same boat that Cliff's on at the start of the game, and the events play out again. But if that was really the idea they were going for, that's an incredibly vague way to do it. I feel like if they'd hinted throughout the game that this wasn't the first run, then I think the post-credits secret would have worked a lot better. I don't think Escape Dead Island is an entirely bad game. In fact, throughout the game I did find myself enjoying bits and pieces of it. I live by a simple rule of, if it's fun, then I will play it. Which does explain why I have quite a few hours in some games that everybody hates. And considering I beat the entire game, this game does have some sort of fun throughout it. But I feel like if you're a fan of Dead Island and you want to play something while we wait for Dead Island 2, this is probably the best spin-off out there. Which, when you look at the competition, it really doesn't say much.